They said we'll start with our opening statements. We didn't flip a coin or anything. We did? All right, John, it's on you.
Thank you. First, I want to say it's an honor serving District 98 in the House of Representatives. Thank you for putting on today's event. I will say my wife is here. My kids are in school today, so my wife, actually we're high school sweetheart, she's here, thank you. And my in-laws, Joe and Nancy, who are from Charleston. They had to evacuate because of Hurricane Matthew. They're here today, and my father's actually a retired naval officer, and I know we have lots of military, including Jane, and I want to recognize those who have served, veterans, current, our police officers. Thank you for your service, all people in uniform, so thank you for that. I will tell you that my last 2 years in Raleigh, when you elected me, I went to work, folks. I went to Raleigh, and I dug right in. The people who know me best know that that's what's important to me. And in my first 2 years, I sponsored and co-sponsored 70 pieces of legislation. I was actually appointed to 9 committees, 3 joint legislative committees, and I also received the second most effective freshman ranking from the North Carolina Center of Policy Research, which is a bipartisan group. It's ranked by the media, believe it or not, the media, lobbyists, and all my peers. And I was ranked as the second most effective freshman out of 20, which is about a 95. And I'm very proud of that because it's completely bipartisan. Every legislator wants to know what their ranking is. And I will tell you that I've cut taxes, I've worked on improving our economy, I've worked on health care, I've worked on removing burdensome regulations on business, and I'm excited to go back. I'm excited to be here today, and really hope you all send me back November 8th. So thank you for listening, and hope we have fun today. Thanks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here today. John, thank you for serving us as our representative. As many of you know, I'm a Davidson College graduate who spent 26 years in the United States Navy, retiring in 2015, although we were fortunate enough to move back in 2014. And during my Navy career, I had some amazing opportunities, including service at sea on board the aircraft carrier Dwight D. Eisenhower, a couple of other ships. I was also privileged to serve on the National Security Council staff at the White House under President George W. Bush's administration. I served a year-long tour in Kabul, Afghanistan. In between, I had tremendous tours in places like Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, Norfolk, Virginia, and Miami, Florida. So I came back to North Carolina, fully with the intent of being a retired Navy captain and working for nonprofits in our local area. And that's what I was doing. I was doing that right up until March 23rd. And on March 23rd, the legislature passed House Bill 2. And my opponent helped create the language, sponsored the bill, and voted for the bill. And on that day, I looked around, and despite the multitude of issues facing us in the 98th District, despite the fact that there are nearly 60,000 registered voters, probably more than that now given the tremendous voter registration effort, my opponent had no one going against him. He was going on the fast track back to Raleigh without an opponent in November's election. I decided not to let that happen. I believe that the inherent part of democracy is ensuring that there are at least 2 people's names on the ballot. So I went out and I got the Mecklenburg Board of Election told me that I needed to get 2,390 signatures on petitions to get my name on the ballot. We got 2,817. We did it ahead of schedule, and I'm proud to be standing here now as your candidate for the North Carolina House. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Okay, we'll get started with the questions, and John, we'll start with you, and after your answer, so on. The first question, do you support your party's nominee for president and governor? Why or why not?
Well, I'm not surprised this question's being asked. An answer. You know, I will tell you that I actually put out a statement the other night based on my party's nominee, and what my nominee said is really unacceptable. I'm married, 3 daughters. My place of employment mostly have females who work for me. You know, but I will also say that on the other side of the coin, we have Hillary Clinton and her husband Bill, who's a big part of her campaign. And so we can't discount him because he's a very active role. And we have real character flaws, I think, in both candidates. And so I will just tell you that I have 28 days to decide what I'm going to do. But I will tell you, I will not be voting for Hillary Clinton. I do not agree with her policies on our economy and business, trade, defense. I do not agree with her at all. And most certainly, I think actions speak louder than words. And hopefully, the debate performance the other night with Trump, I thought he did a nice job. And so we still have about 3 or 4 weeks to go, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you, Lisa.
Governor.
Am I out of time? 20 seconds. The governor race, I most certainly have had the enjoyment of working with McCrory and Cooper, and I can tell you for the last 2 years, Roy Cooper has not done his job as Attorney General, so I absolutely will not support Roy Cooper. And my governor and I, we're at odds over a major issue in my community. There's no doubt about that. But even still, I absolutely will support McCrory over Roy Cooper.
As I already mentioned, I had the incredible privilege to serve in the administration at the National Security Council for the George W. Bush administration. And with my 26 years of Navy experience, I stand here and tell you that I believe that Donald Trump is unfit to be Commander-in-Chief. So I'll be supporting the Democratic nominee for President. I will also say that despite a message calling into question Trump, it took that long for my opponent to say that. He didn't call into question when Donald Trump insulted the Gold Star family. Didn't call into question when he insulted a myriad of women. Didn't call into question the Republican nominee when he basically insulted a disabled reporter. Didn't say anything when he insulted all Muslims. So again, I'll be with the Democratic nominee. I'll also be with the Democratic nominee for governor. I believe that we need change in Raleigh, and if we're at loggerheads with what's going on in Raleigh, the only way to change that is by electing Roy Cooper as our next governor.
Yes, I was just making sure I understood the format. So just a quick rebuttal. Again, we have serious character flaws really on both candidates, and I think considering I know this is a local debate, but most certainly we're talking about federal issues. You know, Hillary Clinton, 33,000 emails. That would take me 30 days every minute of deleting an email to delete 30,000 emails. So the reality is both parties, I think, have real serious issues, and it's a shame that of all the people out there, 350 million Americans, we don't have better choices.
Next question, Jan, I'll give this one to you to start. What is your reaction to the Black Lives Matter movement, and what do you think about recent legislation to shield police body cam video from public view?
I think it's an incredibly important issue, and I think it's one that right now we have so many different elements of society that are completely grappling with an incredibly difficult situation. It's tragic when anyone is killed. It's even more tragic when, you know, one of my fellow law enforcement officials, and I take that as somebody who wore the uniform for 26 years. I have, my godson is a sheriff in, down in Hillsborough County in Florida. But what our law enforcement officials face every single day is a challenge with the weapons that are out on the streets. So I have to tell you, I think we have to engage from a perspective of trying to understand, realizing that standing in front of you as a white woman of privilege, make no bones about it, I cannot put myself in the shoes of many of the citizens of not only our district, but of Mecklenburg and Greater Charlotte area. And I think it's going to take real discussion. And I think we genuinely haven't started that discussion, but we have to. We have to go about doing that. And to the second point of the issue in terms of body cams, I think you have to release that imagery. We saw two distinct examples within the past month. Out in Arizona where the footage was released very quickly, and then when the amount of unrest that was generated by the delayed release. So I think we need to be able to release that footage. Thank you.
lives do matter. In fact, I think even folks in part of that movement will say all lives matter. Charlotte has experienced times that I imagine for you who are local have never seen before. I mean, our country, we're so divisive right now, it's a shame. You know, I support wholeheartedly our men and women of uniform. And I think the more body cameras we can put on these folks, the better, period. In fact, the last 2 years I supported legislation for grants that would make sure that we can get body cameras to rural departments that can't quite frankly afford them. Most certainly, you know, the body cameras are there to protect all parties, for transparency. We have a lot of healing to do, there's no doubt about it. What happened in Charlotte, the looting and the rioting, there's no place for that. And, you know, we've had 9 police officers that have been killed in the last week. I haven't seen a single press conference from the current administration about those officers. I just haven't. You know, police officers are not inherently bad. These are good people who put their lives on the line every single day. But just like any industry, there's always a bad apple. There's a bad apple in any industry you want to think of. But I want to celebrate them, and let's get them as many body cameras as possible. And when it comes to releasing that footage, most certainly it should be released. But it needs to be released in a very mature and prudent way, because at the end of the day, we all know what it's like when we get on Facebook and you see something get out of hand very quick. We need to be calm, and we need to have a very prudent process of how we do that. Because transparency is key, and I must certainly support it. Thank you.
Global warming is occurring. Do you agree that humans are only responsible for this?
Well, I mean, global warming is happening, and humans have a direct impact on that. You know, you might not know this about me, but I'm an environmental engineer by degree. That's what I went to college for. I don't practice environmental engineering anymore, but most certainly my job was to go out and clean up soil and groundwater for environmental catastrophes. That's what I did. So, as a Republican, some might think it's a contradiction, but I'm really focused on cleaning up our environment. You know, at the end of the day, though, we have to make sure we support science and not just tall tales. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on global warming, but we have to realize that we're energy hogs. I mean, you think about how many devices you go home and charge at night, how many lights you leave on when you're not there. We, as Americans, demand energy, and there's a cost for that. Whether we like it or not, there's a cost for that. And we have to be able to benefit the cost of that energy for our demands and how we produce it. And there's always going to be unintended consequences. We just have to be smart about how we approach it. And when we see those real issues, we've got to work hard to fix it. All right? Thank you.
Perhaps as nominee for president would look at the science behind global warming. So maybe you can have that moment with him to share the science behind it. It is an incredible problem. And I don't think that you can look at history or look at the facts or look at science and think otherwise. We have important work to do, and the state of North Carolina can actually be a leader as we move forward with renewable energy. And that's where I think our focus needs to be. For all of us that moved here because we wanted to go take that drive along the Blue Ridge Parkway, or we wanted to go down to the beaches on the Outer Banks, we have to make sure that we are taking care of the environment, and global warming is being caused by humans, but there are other things that are causing as well, but we can define. So answering the question, yes, I believe that humans are doing that, but I also believe that in 2016, we have to use the 2016 21st century technology and intellect that we have to address the issue and come up with solutions so that we aren't passing along problems to the next generation of North Carolinians and Americans. Thank you so much.
So I actually agree with Jane about renewable energy. In fact, I've really been one of the few Republicans in Raleigh leading clean energy efforts. In fact, I received the Emerging Leader Award from the clean energy industry because I am an engineer. I believe in investing in technology to try to take renewable energies because, folks, we need energy independence away from the Middle East. Our Middle East consumption, we do not. The other night on the debate, I heard one of the nominees, Hillary Clinton, say that we do have energy independence. Folks, that could be further from the truth. We have men and women, our soldiers, over in the Middle East still fighting to make sure that we get that precious black crude every day. The reality is we need to make investments, we need to keep our energy prices low, but we need to continue to invest in clean energy, and most certainly I want to comment about that. Thank you.
with Cindy?
Yes, I believe that the contract entered into with Cintra is a bad contract. I think it's a lengthy, 923-page, extensive, what most folks would call a concession contract with a foreign company, a 50-year contract. And I would say, I mean, I have just tried to look at the history of the issue. Because as I pointed out, I was in the military for 26 years and did not come back to the area until late 2014. But what has been important is the issues going forward. But we can't get there without at least acknowledging that there were votes that were taken on this critically important issue before those contracts were signed. And I think those votes matter. And you should hold those elected officials accountable for votes that they placed in 2013 in support of those. But bottom line, I would work with the next governor and the new Department of Transportation to do everything that we could to step out of the contract. I think the other thing that's an incredible likelihood is based on the Cintra's and or their subsidiaries' performance in other contracts, is that if we aren't able to get out of the contract, we have to be able to be prepared when they fail to live up to their contract, as they have done in at least two other circumstances. So, one, I think we just fundamentally have to work with the next governor and with the Department of Transportation to get out of the contract.
So I'm glad my opponent brought up accountability because, for the last 2 years, there's been a war being fought against toll roads. And my opponent lived right here in Davidson doing nothing. And when I mean nothing, we can pick zero, nada, zilch, nothing. I have been fighting for 2 years in Raleigh. In fact, when I was a town commissioner, I actually led an effort to get a letter signed to the governor about this project. You know, actions here speak louder than words. And I know many of you are getting a lot of collateral in the mail about my support of tolls. Well, folks, it's pretty simple. Go to thetolltruth.com. It's a website that I've launched that will let you see in our own words. It will let you see in our own words what our survey responses were to the I-77 Business Plan Group. This is a group of local electeds and community leaders who have been fighting the tolls. And they put out a simple 4-question survey. And one of them says, what have you been doing for the last 2 years? Folks, I had over 20 distinct things, including passing a piece of legislation in the North Carolina House that was against all odds to terminate the tolls. It was the undoable and the unthinkable, and I pulled it off, and I was the sponsor of that bill. So there is no question about my fight for tolls. But do not be fooled. My opponent has done nothing about this. It is all about banter because it's an election. So if you want to see for yourself, go look at the survey responses. It's our words. You can't run from it. Thank you.
I would say that facts matter. On March 6th of 2013, he voted 2-2, and the mayor of Cornelius had to extend the additional vote. And in terms of effective legislation, as I said, my opponent helped write, sponsor, and got HB2 through in roughly 12 hours. It took him 16 months to introduce his piece of legislation discussing the toll lanes. 16 months, introduced on April 25th of 2016. You elected him to legislate. 16 months of going to meetings does not equal legislating. So 16 months, introduced legislation, and yes, he did get it out of the House without the signature of the Speaker of the House. And then it was found to be out of order by the Senate. So I ask you, what do you call a piece of legislation that is voted for in the House but never makes it out of the Senate? It's a failed piece of legislation, and you have had nothing for 2 years from your elected official.
You know what's very interesting? The questions about tolls.
Excuse us, please. 1 second,
We're going to have
please.
2 rebuttals here,
We'll
John,
have two
and
on
then Jay.
this.
Yeah, we were told we get a rebuttal to question, folks.
Yes. 1 second. 1 minute.
John, we're going to have Jane go after you, and then we're going to move on.
And then we'll-
So John, let's 60 seconds on this, please.
Yeah, fair enough. We were told we had a rebuttal, so again, she kind of, I'm not trying to be unfair. Okay, anyway, a little civility would be appreciated, all right? So, you know what's very interesting? Thank you. So, let's just cut to the facts. This was a question about tolls, and my opponent just pivoted, did a quick two-step to HB2. But you know what's interesting? When the Democratic primary was here, if tolls meant so much to my opponent, why didn't she run for office? Why didn't she run for office? Why didn't she file to run against me and the Democratic primary before HB2 if the tolls meant so much to her? But you know what, folks? It doesn't. She's only using it because it's popular. So don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. Just like don't be fooled, this is an unaffiliated candidate. Folks, this is a Democrat running because she missed the primary because she was upset about HB2, not about your toll lanes. If she did, she would have been fighting arm in arm with me in Raleigh to get it stopped. So she can say whatever she wants, but facts matter. TheTollTruth.com, look at her survey, look at mine, it'll be clear. Thank you.
My opponent's exactly right. I did not get into the race until he took away the rights of every single North Carolinian. If he had wanted to, in that piece of legislation, simply repeal Charlotte's ordinance, they could have done that. But instead, they slid in 2 additional pieces of legislation. So if you call this a pivot, it's fine. I acknowledge I did not get into the race because of tolls. But nobody else, not one other Democrat or unaffiliated candidate got into the race for that reason either. But I got into the race, I got those 2,800 signatures, so you now have a choice. So regardless of where you stand on the issue of tolls, you have a choice in November. That's what I brought forth to this race, an inherent element of democracy, putting a second person's name on the ballot. And we are having this conversation now because I went through the effort to do that. I was completely motivated by HB2, but I disagreed with his vote on 77 tolls in the first place, and I think it's time that we are able to hold him accountable. Thank you.
Clap nicely and keep your moans and your groans and your things, please. Thank you. All right, our next question. We'll go ahead and start with John on this one. Given your opposition to a toll road, what is your plan to alleviate traffic in North Met, including rail?
So, I mean, obviously the interstate is a local road to many of us. You know, we do have some options, and that's Highway 115 and 21. But both of those really have their limitations because one of those roads goes right through downtown Davidson. You know, so we need to continue the fight to see if we can get general purpose lane money. You have to understand, the state of North Carolina has great borrowing debt capacity. And that was one of the things that, as a town commissioner, I was told we did not have. But there is availability of bonds to go get money. And those bonds could be used to put in general purpose lanes instead of toll roads. But in addition to that, we need to be fighting for other examples. The rail is not ours to make that decision. It's owned by Norfolk Southern. Norfolk Southern, folks, has absolutely zero interest in using their rail to help us. So that's really not an option on the table. And you really can't talk about it until they decide they want to do something. So we have to focus on 115 and 21, and the only thing we can do is try to fight for dollars to make that happen. But as part of the current CRTPO strategy, we're at the mercy of a larger organization, and that's called Charlotte. And when I go back to Raleigh, I'm going to do my best to see if we can change the inequity voting formula of CRTPO, because no matter what we do, we're always going to have to do what Charlotte does, and I'm tired of that. Thank you.
It's very interesting. When I was a college student, I was one of those geeky college students, and I actually went to the Regional Transportation Board's presentation that they gave roughly 1985, and it was the 2025 plan. It not only reflected what was going to be 485, but it talked about light rail and all of the other things that we are going to do. And I will tell you, we're not going to get there. And that's one of the things that you actually have to look at. We have to stick to long-term planning. You can't change those long-term plans and the funding and the budgeting by shifting and moving money around to make immediate changes, you have to still make sure that you have that long-range planning. So that's the effort that I want to get back to. I think that light rail has to be an issue. I think we have to figure out if there is any leverage to be made with Norfolk Southern. I've talked with a number of people who said that we believe we dismissed that issue all too quickly. But again, there are other options out there as well. As somebody who had that privilege of serving inside the Beltway at the Pentagon and at the White House, I looked at the multitude of other things, whether they are contracted buses that would expand upon what CATS already does, but there are a number of things that we have to look at. But again, remember, on long-range planning, we really have to put our effort behind that and not whimsically move money around and just basically back away from those programs. So I think there have to be other options, including tolls. I mean, including rail.
I think what I just heard is my opponent supports long-range planning, which is all about what CRTPO is supposed to do. The problem is, every time Charlotte votes, their vote counts 46%. It doesn't take much for them to go find another town, like a Matthews, a Mint Hill, to vote with them to give us our destiny. Do you know how frustrating that is? Our decision is in the hands of a larger group that has a much higher weighted vote. So whether we shift money, I think what we need is relief. We need congestion relief, folks. So where we get the money from is irrelevant to me. We need to get the money. And we can do that by trying to raise bonds in North Carolina because we have the debt capacity. And if we could offer these alternative routes, it would absolutely ease some traffic congestion. And as far as the rail goes, rails are very, very expensive. Wouldn't it be nice to take that money and just go give us some general purpose lanes?
Next question, John. What? No, Jane, sorry. Laws have consequences. Has HB2 had a positive or negative economic impact on our state? Please explain in detail.
The one positive thing that I can say about HB2 is it put me in front of you this afternoon at this event. And it gave you a choice of who you want to elect in November. But the negatives, we could stand here, and I'm sure I can't do it in the allotted amount of time, so I'm sure I'm going to start getting the high signs that I'm taking too much time. But we can just look at this and just look at the incredible negative impact on our state. It has been financial. It's been our state's reputation. I mean, we've had friends who have traveled internationally, and North Carolina is now known because of HB2. You have international, different countries. Great Britain issued a travel warning to their LGBTQ citizens to not come to our state. It's not the reputation we need. And again, it was divisive legislation that he got to be in part of the working group to put together that legislation that is discriminatory. We don't need it. We didn't need it in the first place. And the costs are just way too high. And while I can't make the direct correlation to the bonds that you were talking about, if you go and check out an article that was written probably about a week ago, one of the largest investment groups in the United States, investors that typically have over $2.1 trillion to invest in big projects like that. They're using state retirees bond money, etc. They're voting within the next several weeks as to whether they will continue investing in the state of North Carolina. So you take all of the economics that you've already heard about and then potentially have companies who are not going to put money behind those big projects while we have HB2 on the books.
So let me tell you what you're not going to hear a lot about HB2. It's pretty simple. The Charlotte ordinance went too far. It's a violation of our state constitution. Okay? It went too far. Simple as that, folks. Okay? And also, when you take the fact that it went too far, the other thing you need to understand, which you won't hear a lot about, is the day we took the vote on HB2, do you know 25% of the Democrats in the House voted for it? 25% of the Democrats in the House voted for it. Do you know why they voted for it? Because they too believe that municipalities should not be allowed to break the state constitution and exceed their legal authority beyond their city limits. Imagine a day when Cornelia starts trying to enforce its rules upon Huntersville businesses, or Davidson passing something trying to enforce it upon Cornelius. Folks, the legislature's job is to make sure municipalities work within their boundaries. The city of Charlotte did not do that. So here we are. I know of 2 different attempts with state, Senate, and the House where leaders approached Charlotte to try to compromise. And the city of Charlotte is picking politics over the well-being of this state. Period. And you can look as close to this issue as you want, and you will see that there has been no effort on the part of Charlotte to come together with us and figure this out together. And if I go back to Raleigh, I look forward to working on that. Thank you.
All right, we're down to 30 seconds for rebuttals. But bottom line, I make the point again to you. Charlotte's ordinance put into place after years of discussion. And this was Charlotte's ordinance that had also been expanded and progressively expanded in the 1960s to include African Americans, expanded to include women. This was the additional addition to their non-discrimination ordinance, as more than 225 other cities and municipalities already had. But if they simply wanted to repeal Charlotte's ordinance 8 days before it would have gone into effect, why didn't they simply do that? Why did they tack on the additional measures of bad legislation? That's not what they did. They railroaded through 4 pieces of legislation in one incredibly bad bill that we didn't need in the first place.
So the reality is you can't repeal HB 2 if you have an ordinance sitting on the books that breaks the law. So as soon as Charlotte is ready to back their ordinance up, the state legislature was committed and has been committed to back ours up. And then Charlotte can go back and pass an ordinance that only focuses on Charlotte. But under no circumstance can a city force business owners outside their city limits to adhere to an ordinance. I mean, we cannot let that policy happen in North Carolina. Regardless of the policy, you cannot allow municipalities to start enforcement beyond their city limits. It's that simple. So again, when Charlotte is ready to come together with us and repeal it, we'll do it. But it will take them backing theirs up, and then for us to back ours up. And you know what? Let's come out arms in arms. Let's all come to the microphone together and say, you repeal yours, we'll repeal ours. But you won't get that, because the politicians in Charlotte, they're enjoying this radical agenda issue, and they will not do it.
There's a lot of discussion in the news about teacher pay in North Carolina. The health plan is awful. If a teacher has a family deductibles are $4,500 per year. Please react.
Well, this sounds like, I don't think we have time to answer 2 parts of the question, so we'll focus on the education piece. You know, we have a $22 billion, with a B, state budget, $22 billion state budget. Do you know that 57% of $22 billion, and for any math majors, it's about $12.5 billion, goes to education in this state. $12.5 billion of a $22 billion budget. So we have moved the needle. We have increased spending in North Carolina for teachers, and we're not there yet, but we have a ways to go. But what we really need to be doing is focusing on the child in the classroom and making sure we are maximizing their experience in the classroom. We have added wireless to schools. We have made sure all teacher assistants come back. We have given raises. We'll continue to give raises. So I am committed to education. I have 4 kids. In fact, I received an All-Star Legislator Award in education. And I was appointed to the K-12 education last session. So no one is going to fight harder for education having a family of 4 who I want to have the best educational experience possible in the classroom. Thank you.
I'll try to get at both. One, I think one of the critically important issues in the money that he has just talked about he didn't also mention the fact that the money that's being pulled out of the public education system. And there are a multitude of different ways that it's being pulled out, but I would tell you one of the ones that I find very quickly that I can elaborate upon are the opportunity scholarships. Vouchers by any other name. This year, more than $24 million out of that budget taken to send students to private schools. Not charter schools, but private schools, and the vast majority of those schools are religious schools. But then they were not satisfied with just putting $24 million toward it. They voted and put forth legislation and passed that $10 million a year is going to be pulled out of the budget to be added to those vouchers. So by the 2027 school year, $144 million of your tax dollars and mine are going to be spent on sending children to private schools. I've got nothing against private schools other than my taxpayer dollars going to fund it.
You know what's very interesting? We talked about Black Lives Matter earlier. Do you know opportunity scholarships predominantly go to families of color and impoverished areas? Those are the kids that are getting the benefit, and they're the ones that need the help. These scholarships help low-income families, and the reason they're going to private school is because the schools aren't working for them, period. So you're right, I do support opportunity scholarship because I believe every child and their parents deserve an opportunity to put their child in a school where they can get the education they deserve. Thank you.
Then let's put that money back into our public classrooms. Let's put it towards teacher pay. Let's put it towards the salaries that ensure, and as we all know, my time in the military taught me, there was a lot more than my base salary. And whether we're talking the medical benefits, whether we're talking for teachers, those master's degree programs that were added to their salaries. We've had senior teachers actually take a net pay loss based on the removal of the national standard pay and master's degree pay. So let's focus on our public schools.
Remarks. John, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. You know, I would just tell you that I don't take the word representative lightly, and I've worked hard to live up to the name. You know, in 2 years, I've sent literally thousands of letters to new people moving in the district, welcoming them. My office is open. I have office hours every single day. I have taken the PAGE program and gone to every public high school in my district, making sure that I get pages, which are high schoolers, into Raleigh. I mean, I live up to the name representative. I started LK Election Connection, and I don't even, that site is not allowed for campaigning. I don't even put my names on there because I try to make sure that site is there for any elected official to interact with its constituents in the community, period. We have a small set of rules there, and it's basically be respectful and don't campaign. And I started that, has over 800 followers now. Transparency is key to me. Those of you who know me best, you know I'm available, period. My cell phone's available, and as I hopefully will earn your vote November 8th, electbradford.com is my website. I have signs outside. If you want to take one, but I hope you send me back, and when I go back, I want you to come see me. And when you come see me, I'll show you what I do every day, because I'm away from my family 4 days a week, every single week, week after week. But I do it because I love it, and my wife and family give me the support to do it. It's an honor serving all of you. I enjoy it tremendously. We won't always agree, but what you'll get with me is I will be accessible and I will hear you out. And that's all I can offer to you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule. And Jane, good luck. Thank you.
John, thanks for being here this afternoon. Thank you for agreeing to be part of this discussion. And ladies and gentlemen, as I've alluded to, I had the distinct privilege of being a public servant, serving in uniform for more than 26 years in the United States Navy. I'm now asking to be a different kind of public servant. One that wears a uniform probably a little bit like this, and a lot less like the one that I wore for the 26 years. And I'm doing it because I believe in that democratic process. I believe that the big things, that the challenges that we face in this district, in this state, and in this nation take a bipartisan approach from the start. I was avowedly nonpartisan those 26 years that I served in uniform. I saw with my own eyes while I worked in the White House and the National Security Council staff that big things don't happen in a political silo. They happen when you build the core of the solution together, and you reach across the aisle, you find common ground, you figure out where you and the folks on the opposite side of the aisle have those common needs and the common interests, and you attack the big issues in a bipartisan fashion. And that's the kind of representative I'm going to be. I'm going to seek bipartisan support for the big issues that North Carolina needs and the citizens of North Carolina should expect and demand from their representatives. So I hope you'll vote for me, whether early voting, come right here to this room at Cornelius Town Hall if this is your voting place. But look at the facts and see if you want to keep the same kind of legislative actions that have been going on in Raleigh for at least the last 2 years. I don't think you do. I offer that different solution. I'm Jane Campbell. I'm running for the North Carolina House, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jane Campbell. Thank you, John Bradford. You guys did a good job. Really appreciate this. Also, thank you, Lisa Mayhew. Awesome job. I see the clock in the back says 1 minute to 1. I promise to get us out at 1. Thank you to all the volunteers. There's so many volunteers who made this happen. I so much appreciate you. Also the town of Cornelius who set up the room. I'd like to explain something. American Legion Post 86 is organizing and funding, with the help of the community, a monument, a bronze monument in honor of all soldiers. But in this case, it's Jerry Crump, a Medal of Honor winner from here. Isn't that amazing? So, Mike Puckett, would you come forward, please? We have a check for you towards that statue. Thanks so much. Thank you, folks, for coming. Thank you, candidates. We appreciate you. Thank you.